Hi friends, Vicki with a Whimsy Stamps video here, and today I'm going to show you how to make a plaid background using your Whimsy Stamps Get in Line stamp set, including the MISTI tool, like I made on this card right here today. So to start off with, I'm using the Get in Line stamp set. This is a new release from Whimsy Stamps with lots of fun images in here to create plaids and lines and all kinds of different fun techniques. I'm also going to use this Scripty Love word die from the new release as well on my project. So to get started, I have decided to use my MISTI tool to make my plaid background, and you can see I've already started out by stamping a couple lines with it, and I'm going to show you how I did that. First, I have lined up the image onto my paper where I wanted it to be, and I picked it up with the other side of the MISTI tool, the lid on it. I am inking it up with some My Favorite Things hybrid ink. This one's called Ripe Raspberry. And I'm just going to stamp that, close the lid, and by closing the lid, I'm going to stamp that line right where I had picked it up from. And you can see this is one thing that I love about using the MISTI tool for, because as you can see here, after I stamped it, the line does not quite look like the others. It's not as defined or as dark as I want it to be. And this is what the MISTI tool is really great for. It's for inking up an image in the exact same place over and over without it blurring up your image or anything like that, which I have a hard time with. And that's exactly why I recommend using a MISTI tool when making a plaid background like this. I do have acrylic blocks that fit these particular long images, but I find that it's hard to line up through that really thick acrylic, and I wear glasses and it's hard for me to see, so I just have a hard time lining it up. It may work for some of you, and you're welcome to try that out if it works for you, but I had a hard time with it. Another option that I find might be a little bit better than acrylic block is the Fiskars stamp press. And if you've seen my other videos, then you've probably seen me use my Fiskars stamp press before. And I think it helps line up the stamps because it has the grid lines on it, and you can kind of hover over top of it to see where you're at. And I've seen people get really good results making a plaid background with it. But for the Fiskars stamp press tool, I don't know if it's because I can't see well or what, but I had a hard time, again, inking up the image twice like I'm doing here on the MISTI. I had a hard time inking it up over top of the one I originally did to darken up the lines and get it the way I wanted it to look. I don't always use my MISTI tool, but I think it's a wonderful tool for doing techniques just like this one when you need to re-ink an image over and over to get the desired look you want without blurring the lines. You can see there's a little bit of white on the edge of it. I think there was a piece of cardstock that was kind of stuck up and I couldn't ink it. So it was no problem. I just used my ink pad and just kind of went over the edge of it and saved the project, no problem. So now I just turned it over horizontally and used the magnets. Those magnets are important. They come with your MISTI tool and they help hold your piece of paper in place right where you want it. Now I've pulled out another line. This one's a little bit thinner than the first one. I've lined it up where I wanted to start stamping on my background, and I'm picking it up with the lid. And now I'm inking it up with another My Favorite Things hybrid ink pad. This one I think is called Tickled Pink. It's a very, very light pink ink. It's a little bit lighter than I wanted it to on there, so I'm inking it up again to help darken up the ink on there. Again, this is why I think the MISTI is a really great tool to use for this, because doing all this stamping and lining everything up, you want to make sure that you don't ruin anything on here. And I think a MISTI tool is kind of a perfect way to ensure that you can continue on with your design and not have to worry too much about re-inking something up without messing it up. So that's why I highly recommend a MISTI tool when you're making plaid backgrounds like this. So now I'm taking the, I think it's like 3 stripe line on the image here, and I'm taking the Simon Says stamp ink pad called Schoolhouse Red and inking that up. And you will see that I'm continuing to go over each one. And I also wanted to mention, you see me cleaning it off each time that I go to move the line over. And that's simply because I don't want to try and pick up the image with all that ink on it and get red ink all over my project and ruin my project after spending all that time and work on it. So that's why I clean it off every time that I move it, so I don't risk messing anything up on it. So now I've turned my card back over the other direction. This is just another layer of lines that I'm going to put on it. When I make a plaid background, in my opinion, there's really no right or wrong in it. I didn't have a plan when I did this. I just started stamping some lines. The only thing that I had planned out with this project was the colors in my design. I was going for like a love design, so I had the pinks and the reds in here. So now I'm just inking it up, and I've taken the Tickled Pink, my favorite things ink again, and I have an even thinner line that I stamped and went all the way across with that one as well. This time I have taken some stitch lines and inked those up with the Schoolhouse Red ink again, and I just went right over top of the really thick pink lines. Now I want to show you something about, this is the thinnest line in the stamps. As you can see, there's no way possible I could get that thing to stand up where I wanted it to pick it up with the lid. So here's a little trick for you to just, I took a different approach with it by just lining it up on the grid line on the lid of the MISTI tool. And then I decided to move the paper, the plaid paper itself, to line it up where I wanted it to be with the stamp. This is kind of the opposite way of doing it, but it worked for me because there's no way that I could get that thing to stand up. It was like holding a wet noodle trying to get it on there. So that's just another tip for you to use this stamp set in that way. And of course I'm using the MISTI tool, so it's perfect. Even though this is such a very thin line, I was able to re-ink it up again and get it exactly the way I want it to be on there without blurring it up. As you can see in the finished results, it looks really great. So I'm just moving along and lining it up on one of the lines on the lid of the MISTI tool and getting it as straight as I can. I kind of just pull on it and stretch it out so that it gets as straight as can be on there. And I'm just going to do the same thing all the way across my plaid background here. And of course I'm just moving my paper to line it up the way I want it to be on here before I ink it up. And then once I do line it up the way I want, be sure that you put a magnet down on it. That's what those magnets are for, because they help hold your paper in place. So now I'm taking this Scripty Word Love die from the new release and lining it up where I want it. I'm going for a little diagonal opening to hold my love word die. So I've taken a metal ruler and a pencil and making some lines going diagonally, and I'm just going to trim those off on my paper trimmer. And I also thought it would be fun for the leftover piece in the middle of the plaid, instead of wasting your plaid background that you stamped, you could save that and die cut little hearts or something with that. I think that would be really cool. So now when you die cut out this really elegant word die, I highly recommend using a precision plate when you use it with your die cutting machine. It cuts it out so much easier than if you just go over and over it several times to try and get all of that out. So I highly recommend a precision plate with your die cutting machine. Now I'm using the scallop edge from the Basic Border Dies Trio set from Whimsy Stamps, and I have just die cut the edge on some light pink paper, and I'm just going to glue the plaid background that I made over top of this scallop edge. I thought it would just give it a nice little elegant edge along there. And then I decided to take some white fun foam because I wanted this to pop up a little bit on my card. And I'm just going to attach the fun foam on there. For the love word die, I have stacked up several several of these word dies cut out, and I've stacked them and glued them together to give it a little bit of pop, and then glued that on my card base. And now I've taken the top portion and glued that on. So I'm taking these coordinating dies from the You Complete Me stamp set from the new release, and I've die cut some white hearts from that, and I'm just using some glue and I'm gluing those on my project. And then I'm giving it a little bit of sparkle on the love word die as well as the hearts with my Wink of Stella glitter pen. And I wanted to give a little more effect with the white hearts, so I've used some glossy accents and some glitter, some clear glitter to go over top of them to finish off my project. I hope you've enjoyed my plaid background using the Get in Line stamp set from Whimsy Stamps. Thanks for stopping by.